Hi, Stephen.
Good
Welcome
morning.
to Coresight Conversations Founders Forum. We're happy to have Stephen Wyss join us from CohnReznick. Stephen is the practice leader for their consumer practice. Stephen has been with CohnReznick for 25 years, experienced in retail, consumer goods, fashion. Stephen, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thank you so much, Marie, and good morning, everyone. Always a pleasure to speak with you, Marie, and the team at Coresight. As Marie said, I'm with CohnReznick. We're a leading advisory and accounting firm, and I'm based here in New York. I've been working with retail, apparel, and consumer companies for over 25 years. Not all of those years with CohnReznick, I should note, but for the past 7 or so with CohnReznick. We work with mostly middle market companies, those that are emerging entrepreneurial companies up through small public companies, and we help them with advisory, accounting, and tax services. And such a pleasure to be with you this morning.
Right. Thank you, Stephen, for joining us. And Stephen, I have to note, is also a good friend of the Coresight community. So thanks for being here. So in your position at CohnReznick, I'm really interested, what are the questions you're getting most frequently by your fashion companies, your retail companies, your consumer companies, in response to what's happening with COVID? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in the past few weeks, for the past month, as these days are starting to blend together, we've been working with companies answering their questions on how they can access cash assistance under the CARES Act. We spent a lot of time advising companies and getting them to understand information that's rapidly evolving and developing and how they can help get cash into their business. Unfortunately, as we've just seen, that I think the SBA indicated on their website, they're no longer accepting new applications for the payroll protection plan. It's run out of money. I know that the Senate is looking to extend some additional assistance. So our conversations now are really helping our clients develop plans to make their way through the next few months, and then to emerge, hopefully, to a new reality of doing business post-COVID-19.
So we have a lot of founders, entrepreneurs in the audience. So I just want to let the audience know, as you listen to the questions and Stephen's answers, we'd like you to participate. There's a Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. If you have any questions, please ask. In a few minutes, we're going to start a poll, and we'd like you to participate. There's 3 questions. That'll be very insightful into guiding parts of our conversation as we progress. So thanks everyone for joining us. Yeah, given the fact that they've just closed the funding, do you think that will reopen again?
Yeah, Maria, I think it has to. I know a lot of the companies we've worked with and clients we've spoken to still haven't received the funding. So, and there's still a need. So I think we should see it. It should get expanded. I'm very hopeful for it because there's certainly a need. And when we look at unemployment numbers that continue to rise so drastically, right. When you think about the purpose of the Paycheck Protection Program was to keep people employed. So if companies are not getting that funding, they're going to have to furlough or let go of a lot more people. Our unemployment numbers will continue to rise. And what will be interesting is how will companies begin to emerge and how quickly will they hire people back? I think those are questions that will have better answers if the government extends the stimulus.
Right. Well, hopefully this will all end soon, better sooner than later. But how are you talking to companies in terms of how they should position themselves for their recovery post-COVID?
So, the focus is on really taking inventory in stock, which, as entrepreneurs and business owners, they've stayed awake night after night trying to assess, analyze, and understand what's happening to their business, what's happening to the macroeconomic environment, and how is it they're going to be able to not just emerge, but continue on through the next few months. It's, obviously the things such as talking with lenders and restructuring debt. We work with a lot of companies that are involved in that, negotiating with landlords, vendors, your significant customers, talking with your private equity and venture capital ownership members, providing updated information. The toughest part about the crisis for most businesses is just the unknown. So really, cash flow analysis are updated frequently, but they're not necessarily any more reliable than they were the day before because there is still so much unknown. And helping companies kind of get through this period of unknown until things start to crystallize and we get some clarity and we can really get a good understanding of how to manage cash flow, how are people coming back, customers coming back into the marketplace. So getting through this period of unknown is really the toughest challenge.
Well, so most companies are trying to keep as liquid as possible. So are you helping them parse out the debts that they should be paying, the cash outflows, as many companies are not seeing any cash inflows. Their revenues have dropped significantly.
Yeah, many companies are facing some really tough decisions. And, those conversations with their vendors, with their lenders, with their investors are tough, but they need to be they need to be honest. And I think we're seeing an environment where this is something that's not just impacting one or two companies, that no one, it's not unique across the board. Lenders are working with their customers. Lenders want to see them succeed. We've seen the banks that our clients have dealt with have been very amenable, very open, very understanding, which has been great. And I think that will continue for the next few weeks. But I think once we start to see an emergence, I think then more concrete decisions will be made. And I think certainly those companies that were experiencing troubles pre-COVID-19 are going to see less assistance and understanding from their lenders and investors than those that were strong, which is understandable.
Right. So some of the strong are getting stronger and the weak are getting weaker.
Yeah, it's funny to put it lightly, I guess. But when you see the results, I think yesterday, right, seeing March, sectors, apparel down 50% and retail, other sectors that are doing well in the crisis of grocery, obviously, personal care. But how will things normalize and what will things look like as we emerge from this for furniture companies or sporting goods companies or others? I think that's what we're looking to work with our clients to develop the game plan of. For some, it's an opportunity to reimagine yourself, to take advantage of market expansion in some cases, and to put into place plans that perhaps you were thinking of prior to COVID-19 that now kind of have to be implemented. So it's really working with companies to get an understanding of what's our game plan going to be. And many of our clients, and I think many of businesses that we see out there, are going to look significantly different in the next 12 to 18 months.
What do you see? Put on your crystal ball, use your crystal ball, and what do you see? What changes do you see happening in the next 12 to 18 months?
So I think when you look at, particularly in retail and perhaps fashion apparel and some other sectors, but I think you're going to see brands that have historically had value will be salvaged and make it through the crisis, but perhaps in a new way. Pre-COVID-19, we saw some interesting things with companies like Toys R Us, FEO Schwartz, like toys, transformed, right? And those brands continue, but in a different way. We may see that post-COVID-19 and with some others, perhaps in sporting goods or furniture, or on the apparel side. When you look at pre-COVID-19, a company like Aeropostale reimagining itself and reemerging, can other brands perhaps be doing the same thing, whether it's a J. Crew or Brooks Brothers or other verticals that will evolve and change and perhaps drastically change a business model into a new world business model that focuses on direct-to-consumer store experience, smaller footprints, less locations. I think there's a real potential to see a lot of companies reimagine themselves as they come out of COVID-19.
So it sounds like brands that have a relationship with the consumer, regardless of the difficulties that they may have now in terms of liquidity and working capital, may be able to emerge if the relationship is stronger. They may be smaller, more nimble, but the core of their value is the intellectual property of that brand. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, I think there's still tremendous value there, and we'll see it as I think when we look towards M&A activity post COVID-19 or as we emerge. There's going to be a lot of opportunity for transactions, and that IP value is going to drive some transactions with investors and others that want to take that IP and perhaps take it in a new direction, reinvent it, and take advantage of an opportunity.
Kind of like what we saw with Barney's.
Exactly.
Right.
I would anticipate we're going to see quite a bit more of that. It's a forced revolution now, whereas some companies may have been, particularly those that are larger, takes a long time to steer. They may have hit an iceberg and are forced to steer and change course. And COVID-19 is what's driving that. But we may see many public companies, larger companies that are entrepreneurial, founder-owned businesses are either competing with or working alongside. May go private, may become more nimble, may cut through a lot of the bureaucracy and the red tape they had before. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how this landscape emerges, because I think the competition is, as always, consumers will come back. They're going to come back differently, but they are going to come back, and the competition for the new post-COVID-19 consumer is going to be fierce. Okay,
right. So I know that the CARE Act had implications for taxes for individuals, for small businesses. Can you give us like a broad overview of some of the changes this year?
Absolutely. That's one of the things our tax professionals and we have a COVID-19 task force that's been working with companies. First up was the liquidity and trying to get access to cash assistance. But as we emerge, there have been significant drastic changes to taxes, providing a lot of benefits, whether it's additional credits and employer credits. And I think one of the things that's going to be key as we look to see whether or not the government reinvests in the PPP program is there are some tax incentives for those that don't take advantage of the PPP program and an employee retention credit, which can be very useful. But there are significant changes and relaxations to everything from qualified improvement property, treatment of NOLs and NOL limitations, interest, the limit on interest deductions. All of these things are going to have some significant impacts on not just the 2019 tax return and 2020, but also potential amendments for 2018 as well, and previously filed 19. So as companies get their bearings, really understanding where their tax liability, how it's being impacted and changed, and taking advantage of any credits and additional deductions and accelerated deductions is going to be key.
So you do the finances for public companies and private companies, correct?
We do. We work with both public and private companies in consumer, fashion, retail, on both from an accounting side and also from an advisory side in terms of M&A transaction diligence and a host of other services. We work with companies to help negotiate with their landlords. We look to help companies manage cash flows and provide cash flow models that they can utilize. There's always a silver lining in everything, and there are some companies that are experiencing some good things as a result of this, depending on the sector they're in, and they're growing, and they may be growing quicker than they had anticipated, and now's the time to implement some tools to help manage that growth. I think there's a lot of opportunity for companies to really pay attention in perhaps a new and innovative way as to how things will emerge and what's the impact on our cash flows.
In this environment, when you are growing faster than you expected, for like some of the online staple retailers and brands, what are the barriers to accelerated growth? Because so many parts of the supply chain are just not as smooth as they would be if the economy was open for business fully.
Yeah, I think you raise a good point, Marie. Many of our entrepreneurial companies are seeing opportunities that they didn't have before. But with those opportunities can come challenges. They don't necessarily have the infrastructure on supply chain logistically to get goods into customers' hands quickly. They may be delayed, which is important for many of our direct-to-consumer clients. You still need to deliver and on the brand experience and the customer expectation. On the plus side, even Amazon is experiencing delivery delays. So the consumer, I think, is very understanding at this point that they won't necessarily be able to get their items within 2 to 3 days. But there is certainly opportunity for consumers that are experimenting with new brands, that are with the opportunity to spend more time at home researching and searching the net for the products that they normally would go out to a store and buy, but they don't feel comfortable going out to the store to buy, or they can't find it in a store. I think we're seeing a lot of direct-to-consumer companies that have platforms that consumers weren't aware of before, or maybe didn't think to use, are now suddenly using. So that's great, but those companies need to be able to deliver and provide a good experience, because the worst thing that could happen is they expand their reach, but the consumer isn't particularly happy with the performance of the product or the service, and they come out of COVID-19 with consumers that weren't happy or have a negative image of the service they were provided.
So I have a few questions from the audience, so I'm going to run them by you. One question is, what is CohnReznick doing to help companies with PPP if that is what is required to get people back to work?
So one of the things we've been doing, the PPP program is, companies working with their banks and lenders. That's where it starts, and really that process. For some of our clients, it's incredibly efficient, and depending on the banks and institutions they are working with, and for others, has not been very efficient, and perhaps they haven't gotten their funding yet. It's really educating our clients and our contacts in understanding the nuance, what they're eligible for, what they need to do in order to get that process going. So the first wave is done on PPP, it would seem. So now we will look to help get our clients ready for the next wave, staying constantly on top of things as they evolve, whether it's coming from the government and the communications we receive, as well as working with banks and understanding where the banks are at, how is their process working, how are their clients getting their funding, how quickly are they getting it. So I think our eye will turn now towards the next round of hopefully stimulus that comes, and I'm overly optimistic perhaps, but I think it's incredibly challenging when you think about what the government has done and what banks have done in such a short period of time. I would hope that this next round is going to be smoother and a bit more efficient. I think they've gotten the process down, but there's still so many companies that need assistance that haven't gotten it yet. So I think it's really important that happen quickly, and once it does, we'll make sure our clients have all the information they need to know to go out and get as much as they can in cash assistance.
And the second question I have is, what resources or freebies is CohnReznick providing to existing clients and or small businesses?
So Accessibility to our expertise is the best thing we can offer. So as we've developed a task force, we developed a COVID-19 resource page that our clients and contacts are using to get up-to-date information, to get our thought leadership, to get some of the nuance, particularly on the tax side where things are so complicated. There's only so much we can do to help and advise our clients on PPP or the Main Street lending program and others. But on the tax side is where our true expertise shines, and really advising people of what they need to pay attention to, how they should be getting out in front. If it, amending your returns and getting immediate results, refunds, credits, jumping on those things as quickly as we can. That's what we're helping most of our clients with today.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go. What do you think will happen, given that you're talking with public companies that are releasing earnings, maybe now, imminently, this month, next month? What are the executives saying to you in terms of how they're framing what will probably be disappointing results for Q1, Q2, and then how are they thinking further out?
Yeah, it's, public companies have some challenges, and, I'm an audit partner at CohnReznick, so I do work with some public companies on their audits and providing our opinions on their financial statements. So I'll put my auditor and accounting hat on for a minute if I could. From a technical perspective, there are challenges public companies have that if they didn't face it at their year end, when they provided their year end results, they're going to face it with their Q1 results. Things such as asset impairment, going concern, those things are going to be addressed by many companies in their Q1 filings and earnings releases. So there is a real potential for companies to be disclosing significant asset impairments as a result of COVID-19 and the impact on their cash flows. And particularly for those that perhaps had calendar year ends now or off calendar year ends, going concern. It's really tough for companies to be able to project their cash flows and to satisfy what's called the going concern requirement, which is, will the company have enough cash to satisfy its obligations over the next 12 months after they're issuing their report. And that's a real difficult thing. I know on the audit side, we're working through it with a lot of clients. There's a lot of work that gets put into it. So I think that's what we can expect to see in Q1, the potential for impairments, the potential communication of really drastic reductions in projections. I think it's clear that although some areas of our country are perhaps going to emerge and start to open up, there's a broad-based emergence is a long way off. So I think those, particularly retailers with locations in urban areas, it's going to be a while before you see those retail sales and foot traffic bounce back up to anything near what they were pre-COVID-19. So I think more information is being absorbed and put into projections. So I think you'll start to see some signals from public companies as they go through Q1 and Q2 as to where they really think they're going to be within the next year.
When you think about retailers in urban areas, which is where many of your brick and mortar sales occur, they are impacted by not only the regional, domestic, local traffic, but the fact that they are destination cities, like a New York, a San Francisco, an LA, Miami, Chicago. Lots of retail happens there, but without tourism, retail really drops dramatically. And we know that from watching, the financials at Tiffany or Saks Fifth Avenue. And yeah.
I totally agree, Marie. I think, those that certainly luxury, and that great brand experience of in-store experience, those retailers now need to innovate and find a way to maintain the connection with their consumers, to maintain the interest in the brand. so that when consumers are ready to spend again, they might not be doing it in store like they did before. So how do you get them to spend once they're ready to spend without the in-store experience?
Well, Coresight works with a lot of innovator companies that are doing retail tech, that are providing digital experiences and making stores come alive. So we are involved with that. It's very exciting. They create wonderful brand experiences digitally. But let's look at our poll. So in regards to the first question, whether people, whether the audience feels that they were able to take advantage of the CARES Act, it looks like, you know, less than 10% said yes and it was adequate, or they don't really need substantially more. And basically 90% need more and they couldn't get it.
Yeah, that's telling, right? I think we had not a single respondent indicating that they felt that what they received was adequate. And over half have not received anything. So just illustrates the point that there's still such a significant need, and there has to be an extension of that stimulus from the government. Yeah,
yeah. And then looking at how people see their businesses recovering, it looks like the bulk are looking for a year and a half, right?
Yeah, and I would guess that many people responded with a very, not so sure. It's hopeful. It's a hopeful year to a year and a half, and that's our best hope, and it probably makes the most sense at this point. But there are just so many factors, and I'm guessing that there's going to be some reoccurrence, and there'll be a second wave that probably will, perhaps hit for some like New York and others in the fall. Which, man, whether or not there is a back to school season, I think for most of the country there probably will be at some point. But when you look at those seasons that are really key to the success of so many retailers, back to school and holiday are really in jeopardy. I mean, so there could be a complete wipeout of those, which would be devastating. So I think it's still holding your breath and being hopeful and seeing that there'll be some recovery for back to school and holiday.
It's hard, like what you said really floors me. It's hard to think. Back to school, much of it has already shipped, right? I mean, it's there and it's not open. And so maybe some of it is online. We've heard estimates of holiday being substantially down versus a year ago. And it is so important. I have two more questions that came in. One is this: how quickly have retailers received benefits from the government? How many have been delayed? Do you have a sense of that?
So it's been a mixed bag. Some have gotten it on the same day, and some have still not gotten it while their application was processed as much as a week ago. I don't have, anecdotally, it seems like a mixed bag. I don't have any good statistics on it yet, but I've got probably just about as many clients and contacts telling us we still haven't seen the money as those that say, hey, I got it immediately. I was surprised at how quickly I got it. I think a lot depends on the bank and institution that you're working with. In the early going, obviously, I think there are a lot of stories that Bank of America was very quick on it, Chase not so much. So I do think that has an impact on how quickly companies are receiving their money. But I'm hopeful, fingers crossed, that those that were accepted and they're due to receive their money are getting it today or very soon.
So another question is, the retailers that you're working with, are they anticipating a sales rebound in 4Q in 2021? Do they anticipate business returning to historical levels in a year, ever? So
yeah, I think it depends on the sector and what they're selling. I think when you talk about back to school, it's an interesting concept. I think back to school may be a lot different. It's going to be not great for apparel, but perhaps more for electronics, as I think we've all gotten used to the work from home and some of the schooling from home. But if there is a plan in the fall to implement schooling from home across larger cities throughout the U.S., the need for laptops, devices, the things that make schooling from home work will increase. So I think you can see some opportunity there as people need to equip for schooling from home for not just a couple of weeks, but perhaps for a few months. But I do think overall it's going to be tough. And I think what drives it is consumers. I think consumers are certainly not going to be spending at the levels they were before. So they'll spend. Perhaps the things they spend on are going to be different than they were pre-COVID-19. But I think the consensus is they're not going to spend as much. They're going to be reluctant. They're going to save some more, or they might not have as much to spend. So discretionary spending is certainly going to be significantly impacted.
Yeah. Our final polling question was about entrepreneurs and if they saw any opportunities as a result of COVID-19. And the largest percentage said they saw the opportunity to capture and keep new customers, which is a great silver lining, right? And then the ability to expand direct to consumer and to increase market share. So more saw opportunity than didn't, which is a good thing. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think entrepreneurs are going to be optimistic, right? It's in their nature.
Right.
And there certainly is a lot of opportunity, particularly with direct-to-consumer entrepreneurial businesses. And I think what's interesting to talk about is those that are working with Amazon. So Amazon is chugging along in a lot of ways, is doing well, if you can say that in such a crisis. Those that are working through Amazon have opportunities to expand that market share for their brands to be recognized and tried by more people, and provided they have the inventory, they can source it and they can ship it, there's tremendous opportunity there. I think on the flip side, and particularly, unfortunately, again, with fashion and apparel, which really just keeps getting kicked while it's down, the impact of Amazon fashion, right, is going to be an interesting one. For Amazon, there's opportunity for their own brands, for consumers to interact with them more during this crisis, since you're not going to your favorite stores to buy some of your brands, or you might not have access to some of your favorite brands. You might be more inclined to try an Amazon brand for your bikini, for your shorts, for your tank tops, your summer wear. That's an opportunity for Amazon to make a great impression with consumers. And some consumers may say, hey, I never would have tried this before, but I actually like it. On the flip side, some consumers may say, there's a reason why I never tried this before. I hate it. It stinks. It's not, it's nowhere near what other brands and things that I like. So I think that's really interesting, the opportunity that Amazon is providing, not just for those that sell through it, but also how are they going to take advantage of this opportunity to build their own brand?
Right. Well, certainly there's going to be a lot of product out there, right? And so Amazon does have the opportunity to exceed expectations, and they certainly have done a great job in the last 20 years of setting new expectations, right? Yeah.
They certainly have, and so I wouldn't bet against them.
Right.
But when it comes to fashion, I know, consumers have always been fickle, have always had, while they're not necessarily loyal to a single brand, they're loyal to brands. And I think that's a tough habit to break. So it may take 12 to 18 months, but those brands that consumers love, as the old saying goes, absence makes the heart grow fonder. Those brands can experience a resurgence as consumers come back. And we're going to want to feel good. Consumers are going to want to feel good after emerging from this. And there are great brands out there that connect with consumers and make them feel good. And consumers will come back and embrace those brands again. The trick is to build that experience and have that for your brand, so that consumers can't wait to get their hands on some of your product again when things get back to normal.
Pent up demand, right? So I
Yeah,
think
and we could all use something that makes us feel better these days.
totally. I agree. Looking forward to being able to walk up and down Fifth Avenue again.
Well, you
Right?
can walk up and down Fifth Avenue, you just can't do any
You
shopping.
can't shop, right. Can't go into anything, that's true. Last question, M&A activity. How do you see it impacted by COVID and post-COVID?
Yeah, so you talk about pent-up demand. There's a lot of dry powder in with private equity and others that I expect there'll be quite a bit of activity as people will get into the market. I think certainly, if you look back to the last real financial crisis in 2008, it took a little time, but investors came back. I think we're going to see it. There'll be a lot of opportunities, and I think people are going to look to take advantage of that. And as I said before, either reinvent the business model, look for opportunities to obtain some great IP and customer relationships at a discount. So I think what's going to be interesting in M&A, and we've got a great advisory team that does a ton of diligence on deals, and all they're talking about now is really gearing up and educating people on normalizing the impacts of COVID-19. So how do you look at a business and its cash flows through these next 12 to 18 months and figure out, well, what's a normalized cash flow look like? And it's for good and for bad. Those companies that are really struggling, that you can expect to return to normalization, and those companies that are experiencing growth and they're selling a lot of toilet paper, a lot of personal care products. You don't want to pay a multiple on those COVID-19 sales when there's a reasonable expectation that those levels are going to normalize. So our teams are really building those models to normalize COVID-19 as best we can. And every day we get more information and that model evolves. But I think that's going to be the key to really understanding value in the marketplace. And you'll see a lot of acquisitions and transactions take place.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Stephen. Really appreciate all your insights. It's great to see you here. Looking forward to seeing you physically again at another time. And thank you everyone for joining us. Wrap up, the video will be posted on our website between 24 and 48 hours, so everyone can find it there. Thank you again for joining us, and join us again.